She gives the destitute a day to feel and work. A fortnight later, she receives an odd phone call. Welcome to USA Stories channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. Abby was paralyzed with terror and was unable to move. She needed to embrace the facts even if she didn't want to think that this was happening to her. Allowing a convict to work at her business was a brave decision on her side. But the phone call she received moments ago cast things in a different perspective. It seemed like he was still with her even though he had departed a little more than an hour earlier. She could still smell his fragrance in the store, and it gave her the shivers. She was going to discover just how much this man could do. For 5 years, Abby Smith had been employed at her modest Scandinavian restaurant. She had dedicated all of her time, energy, and resources to realizing her restaurant ownership ambition. But when a homeless guy entered her restaurant one chilly Monday morning, the restaurateur had no idea what was in store for her. Abby has 10 years of experience in the culinary and hospitality industries. She was used to hard, long hours, cliquish co-workers, and impolite clients. She knew it was for the best, therefore, when she decided to start her own company. Though Abby believed she had seen it all over her 10-year career, she was always surprised by what was ahead of her. Abby woke up exactly at 5 a.m. on a Monday. Once again, Monday morning found us in the restaurant. She took a shower and wiped her sleepy eyes. She was very mistaken to believe that it would just be another typical day. Abby was prepared for a hectic day when she got to work. Ready to begin the day, she prepared the meal, cleaned the surfaces, and opened the front door. Then, all of a sudden, there was a homeless man walking inside the eatery. Abby had no idea what to expect from this encounter. "I apologize," the destitute guy said. He spoke softly. "My name is Ricky. Do you have any extra change on hand?" The homeless man had grief in his eyes as Abby glanced at him. "Do you not have a job?" Abby inquired directly. Ricky was surprised by her statement. "No, I don't," he said, averting Abby's gaze. "I have a lot of felonies, so nobody wants to hire me." In spite of this information, Abby gave an unbelievable response. Abby had been observing Ricky, the homeless man, hanging about the neighborhood and outside for some time now. But she never saw him get into any difficulty. He looked to be a recluse. Therefore, not even Ricky could have anticipated Abby's response when he asked her for some change when he entered her eatery. Abby made Ricky an offer to work at the restaurant as she knew she could use some assistance. His eyes and cheeks brightened like a little child's at Christmas. She instructed him to work cleaning and dishwashing all day. Ricky started working right away, and Abby fixed him a sandwich for lunch. But as soon as she gave it to him, he grabbed it out of her hands and fled the restaurant faster than a cheetah. When Abby watched Ricky dash out the door, her heart fell and she took out after him. She observed, however, that he had handed the sandwich to a different homeless guy around the block. He quickly returned to the restaurant, and his thoughtfulness melted Abby's heart, but she was unaware of what was about to happen. Abby made an effort to learn as much as she could about Ricky's background and life during the day. Other than telling her he was from Puerto Rico, he looked reserved and unwilling to talk to her. What did he conceal? Abby realized she couldn't retain Ricky on as a permanent employee since the restaurant wasn't making enough money. Abby was already having difficulty getting by in these difficult times. So Abby said Ricky go at the conclusion of the day. She was mistaken to believe it would be her final encounter with him. But Ricky showed up at the restaurant the next day, and for the next 2 weeks, prepared to begin his shift. He showed up at the door like clockwork, his smile shining through the glass. When he eventually paid Abby, she was at a loss for words. You see, Ricky went to Abby's restaurant to get a lunch as soon as he got paid. She also gave him a staff discount, of course. She said goodbye to him and started packing things for the day. She thought about bringing him on full-time and cutting costs somewhere in the company. But right before Ricky left, Abby got a call that turned everything around. As Abby was wrapping up what felt like an endless day, her phone rang. She took it up, but the number escaped her. She hesitated before taking the phone. She was clueless about what was ahead. "Do you know Ricky?" was queried by a harsh, deep voice. Abby's pulse accelerated. "Who is the caller?" "It's the police," the voice declared. "We have some information about him that we think you should know." She begged the police to tell her all they knew about Ricky, fearing for her life. but she was unprepared for the response. Not in a millennium. The cops decided to look into Ricky's background because they claimed to have seen him about town several times. Ricky told them he was from Puerto Rico and had moved to the United States to pursue his acting career. But before long, he ran out of money and was left homeless. But Abby felt sick to her stomach when she heard what the cops stated next. Tomorrow, have him come in. Verify that he is present at your eatery. The police officers said, "We want to see him." Abby felt a shiver run up her spine. What prompted them to seek him out? Was something wrong with him? She reluctantly consented, but she had no idea what the cops were planning. The next day, Abby was apprehensive about her future when she got to work. Ricky arrived at the front door like clockwork. Abby wanted to tell him about the cops as soon as she saw him, but something inside her urged her not to. She would regret not telling him. Ricky was grinning as soon as he walked inside the restaurant. He got to work clearing the tables, but as soon as he saw 2 police officers enter, his smile transformed into a frown. Ricky attempted to escape the restaurant as soon as possible, but was halted by the 2 police officers. They refused to accept it. They responded, "Don't worry," and blocked the door. However, Ricky had good reason to be concerned of police personnel. You see, Ricky became homeless 4 years ago after he was unable to succeed as an actor and spent all of his remaining money. He took sure to avoid officers as much as possible because he was well aware that they weren't always the good ones. However, Ricky was unaware of what these 2 law enforcement agents intended to do to him. "Come with us now," they urged as they escorted Ricky outside and into the police vehicle. Abby, meantime, saw Ricky being pushed into the car while feeling ill to her stomach and staring out the window. How had she behaved? Had she made a grave error? Abby would fall to her knees when all was exposed in a matter of hours. After 2 hours, Abby was waiting impatiently for a response from Ricky or the police officers. Fortunately, the morning had been somewhat busy. However, the afternoon was approaching, and she was still waiting for a response. Abby was at a loss for words when she saw someone go through the door at 4:30 p.m. A well-groomed man wearing elegant attire entered and grinned at her. At first, she was unable to identify his face, but she could recognize his smile anywhere. It was Ricky, but he didn't look like him at all. Ricky was escorted to a hair salon by the police, who also paid for a haircut. They bought him new clothing as well. However, their generosity didn't stop there. It was determined by the cops that Ricky just needed assistance. He was a decent man who was stuck in a rut and needed a little help. The police started helping Ricky find a respectable employment and even assisted with the paperwork to obtain him a rental in a desirable area. That wasn't all, though. After the authorities mobilized the neighborhood, clothing, food, furniture, and other essential goods were quickly being donated by individuals all around to help him get started. Ricky would have a real bed and a genuine roof over his head as soon as the housing application was approved. Ricky was in disbelief. "I'm stunned," he murmured. "This has actually restored my faith in humanity, even if it was a hand up, not a handout." And although they said that by looking for a job, he had already done the bulk of the hard work to get his life together, Ricky was nevertheless moved to tears by the gesture. In the past, people had been so cold and life had been so harsh. He was on the verge of giving up on mankind. Ricky had experienced years of homelessness, but this new city represented a fresh start, and he would make every effort to end his homelessness. The generosity of strangers had been astounding. Would it, however, be sufficient for him to at last have a fresh start? In their garage, Officer Branson and his family had been storing all the donated goods while they awaited the processing of Ricky's home application. "It's now his responsibility," Officer Brantford stated. "This is where he is going to start. It all comes down to integrating with the community." In fact, Officer Brantford had even been able to contact Ricky's mother back in Puerto Rico. For the first time in their 4 years, the two were reunited via video chat. Disclaimer: names, localities, and identifying traits have been changed to protect the privacy of persons portrayed. All other details are the work of the author's imagination. Any likenesses to real people, places, or events. Ricky expressed his gratitude to Abby and the cops for their assistance at a time when he truly needed it. He had a house, a supportive neighborhood, concerned adults in positions of power, and the helping hands that would eventually enable him to live the life he had always wanted. Disclaimer: names, localities, and identifying traits have been changed to protect the privacy of persons portrayed. All other details are the work of the author's imagination. Any likenesses to real people, places, or events, living or dead, are pure coincidence. Until he checks beneath the hood, the man who inherited the ancient automobile was furious. He intended to grow up to be a man just like his father, who had meant the world to him. Everything had changed suddenly following his father's death, which was not surprising. His brothers tried everything to keep him out of their father's multi-million-dollar riches and expelled him from the house. His late father had planned something his son would never have imagined, but all he was able to get was a dilapidated automobile that was collecting dust in the garage. Tommy's heart broke at learning about his father. As the weeks passed, he discovered that despite his efforts to lessen the suffering he was experiencing, nothing would change. He was left living in a fog. He had a great relationship and gained a lot of knowledge from his father. His father served as both his greatest friend and his source of support in everything. Tommy's world flipped upside down the moment he answered the phone that day, despite his son's insistence that he would never leave his side. When we are kids, we never consider the possibility of not having our parents one day, and even when we come to terms with it as adults, it still scares us. It seemed like Tommy Hawthorne had lost more than just his father. Even though he was already depressed, the fallout would make him cry even more, and he would question how his father could have hurt him in the first place. Tommy's father was a rich author who nurtured Tommy and his brothers. Their father raised kids by himself when they were growing up in London without a mother. He tried his hardest to meet their needs and provide them all of their desires. Though his father had never spoken to him directly, there was a reason why he had always maintained a special place in his heart for Tommy, his last child. Tommy was his father's favorite because his mother had died while he was still being born. He used to tell Tommy that Tommy was his mother's final present to him before she passed away. Tommy's siblings saw their father lavishing love and devotion on him, and they weren't always grateful for it. But Tommy didn't understand why, when his father passed away, he had given him a piece of metal that was meant to create an automobile. When they got their childhood house and a ton of money, how had he ended up with that? Tommy was the only one of his brothers to graduate from high school and attend college. When his brothers decided to pursue a life of spectacles and celebrations, he knew he was different. Considering that their father had the resources to provide for all of their needs and desires, they were never without. They relished a life filled with attractive ladies and fancy automobiles, but it wouldn't last forever. Tommy was pursuing his creative writing studies. The next year, he was about to complete his master's degree when his father passed suddenly. After hearing the news, he was paralyzed and struggled for weeks to get better. Having buried his father, he was still in disbelief. When he sat with his brothers in front of the family attorney to talk about his father's will, that's when he could finally stop distancing himself. Though he never imagined his father would leave him all but penniless, he assumed that his father had given him the house and enough cash to pay for his school. Tommy overheard the attorney stating that his father had given his brothers the home and the majority of his wealth, but he had given Tommy a beat-up automobile that was allowed to collect dust in the garage. The vehicle was a Shelby Cobra that had been kept in the garage for many years. When the lads did eventually see it, they realized that it was a shell of a car with rust where the paint had chipped. They were all perplexed as to why their father would abandon Tommy in this manner. Tommy was in complete shock and disbelief. Why would his father abandon him like this? He had worked hard to become an author like his father, spending years trying to make him proud. Tommy questioned whether he had overestimated his bond and friendship with his father. His brothers could have known something that he was unaware of, and he wanted to know. After the lawyers' meeting ended, Tommy made the decision to go home with his brother. In the hopes that they might be willing to assist with his study expenses, he wished to speak with them. Given that he now had additional issues to resolve in light of his father's passing, it would be beneficial. However, he had just entered the home after his brothers and observed that they were behaving strangely toward him. He dismissed it, not realizing that he would soon discover their actual nature. Tommy's siblings instructed him to stand as he attempted to take a seat in the living room where his favorite chair resides. They'd been saying for a long time how much they disliked him. They threw him out, called a tow truck to assist him remove his trash from their garage. Now that the home was in their name and they owned 99% of their father's money. If Tommy had been devastated to hear of his father's death, he was now incensed. He observed as a succession of young, gorgeous men and women went up the driveway from the comfort of the exterior of his boyhood house. Even though his father's grave's earth was still wet, his brothers were planning a celebration. Tommy regretted the choice he made instantly and ran back in to chastise them. From the top of the stairs, one of his brothers noticed him and yelled at him to get out of their house. Hearing the disturbance, the other brother who was entertaining the visitors saw it. Taking out a hunting rifle, he practiced on Tommy before requesting that he go. With a stutter, he continued, "Dad's no longer here to play favorites," stumbling about while trying to hold the gun on Tommy. "Get out!" Tommy turned around and left the home. He was the target of everyone's jokes. He strolled inside the garage, dejected and alone, to see what his old grandpa had left him. When his siblings phoned for a tow truck, they discovered him at the garage door, unable to even open the door. His shock upon realizing his father was indeed dead had turned back into grief. It would all become true when you stepped into the garage and saw the automobile. Tommy was unprepared for everything. He did not cry or sob, he just let the tears fall. He would welcome this with open arms if that were what his father wanted for him. When the tow truck arrived, it removed the abandoned vehicle. Because everything was done on the fly, Tommy had to hire a garage while he was out and about. He had to discover what made this ancient piece of rubbish so special. The vehicle was towed by the tow truck to Tommy's rented garage. Once inside, the driver assisted him and drove off. Tommy sat in the driver's seat, hands on the steering wheel, all by himself once more. Again, loss clouded his heart and intellect, causing his eyes to blur with tears. It seemed unbelievable to him that his brothers had twice thrown him out of their home. He hoped that the agony would end soon as he grieved for his father. That's when he noticed something in the glove compartment. The sheet was a piece of white paper. It looked ancient, the ends of the envelope dog-eared. Tommy unlocked the glove compartment out of curiosity and took it out. He had had a rough day, so he was grateful for any diversion that would help him forget his discomfort. He tore the letter open and wiped away his tears before starting to read. The letter's date suggested that it was written a few years ago. His father had also written it. It revealed how much Tommy's father loved him and his brothers, but it also expressed the elder man's concerns about Tommy's brothers' prospects due to their risky upbringing. However, there was more. There were certain words at the conclusion of the letter that would make Tommy bow his head. Tommy's father had given him $60,000 sealed in the car's trunk, according to the last paragraph of the letter. Along with the money, he left Tommy some ideas and requested that Tommy start a project of his own. "Adjust this lovely one," the letter said. "In London, there's a private auction. When you're done, take it there and give this number a call." Tommy read and rubbed his head. His father asked him to take a practically totaled automobile to London and fix it up. Taking a deep breath, he decided it was possible since he was done with the field work required by his school. In addition, he wanted something to divert his attention from his situation. Maybe he needed this project after all. Tommy made sure everything was in order before leaving for school. He skipped the remaining courses so he could devote all of his attention to mending the automobile, and he set to work. Hiring professionals who were familiar with handling such a vintage model was the first thing he did. In order to keep the automobile for a few more months, he also paid the garage. He prayed he would fulfill his father's final request. Tommy's brothers used to come to his hotel room and tease him, but he never yelled them out. Instead, he would just greet them with a cup of coffee and go back to work. The weeks quickly passed. In addition, he had split the $60,000 his father had left him between school tuition, auto repairs, and the money he would need for transportation to get the car to London. But he had no idea how long any of this would take to complete. Tommy continued to fix the automobile for 2 years. His brothers had sold their childhood home and fled the nation to pursue their own dreams of adventure. Tommy had, of course, attempted to talk them out of the project, but they had summoned security and had him vacate the property, However, he was currently finishing the automobile. Tommy understood what his father had been thinking just by taking one glance at the Shelby. Tommy's once-old abandoned vehicle had been restored into a stunning vehicle that attracted attention wherever it went. After a further month of making sure the automobile was in excellent operating order and that every component was functioning, a homeless girl gives up her lunch for a blind lady, goes without food, and eventually obtains her mansion. Tale of the day. Great efforts to ensure the well-being and happiness of an elderly blind woman who shared her homelessness once she became friends with her. However, Lena was eventually made aware of the woman's startling secret when she lost that beloved old friend. Who said dreams made of gold could not belong to people who sleep on Tarek? Lena lay on the chilly sidewalk and gazed up into the dim streetlight, thinking lyrically. The girl gave a bashful attempt at poetry a grin, but it was short-lived. She wishes she could share her passion for poetry with someone. She had been placed in several foster homes by life, but none of them considered her to be anything more than a troubled child who would be hard to nurture. It makes sense why she fled from them all. Lena was also aware that poetry had no place on the street. The 20-year-old homeless girl was withering away on the streets, and the world was too serious to even glance at her or hear her ideas on life. Lena, however, liked being outside. They were dangerous and chilly, yes, but so were the residents of the most opulent mansions. Lena embraced her empty stomach and slept off when her eyelids became tired from the streetlight overhead. Lena had a seat just across from the public library, adjacent to the bus stop. She enjoyed having access to all of the knowledge and opportunities she wished to pursue. The library stood out as a ray of hope against the never-ending storm of tragedy she had experienced in her life. Be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. Since she was a young child, she had spent every Sunday there. She had become acquainted with the librarian by this point, and she was even granted permission to use the toilet and read whatever she wanted to read. The owner of the dilapidated, abandoned bistro next to the library was equally gracious. Though it was obvious that his affection for the defenseless, attractive girl had more to do with his kind daily offer of a leftover sandwich. Lena was making ends meet, but her young heart was being tormented by loneliness every day until she saw a fresh face on the streets. The elderly woman, disoriented and walking with a cane, was about to pass out from starvation when Lena's powerful hands broke her fall just in time. It was then that she realized the elderly woman was blind. Lacking the power to speak, the elderly woman croaked, "Water, water." Lena assisted the woman in sipping water from a bottle by opening her rucksack. The old lady drank a few little swallows, then breathed deeply and grinned at Lena. "Petal, thank you very much." She stretched her aching feet and added, "I thought I was going to die." "Not today, ma'am," Lena said with a grin as she examined the woman to make sure she was all right. "Please call me Beverly, or Bev for short. And you too?" "My name is Lena. Glad to have met you, Bev." The two women were silent for a brief period of time. They had no idea that life had brought them together for a reason on that particular road. But over the course of the following few months, one question would break the ice and they would become the closest friendship of their lives. "Would you like to have a sandwich?" Lena jumped at the chance to ask, wanting to be with someone. Bev took a moment to compose herself. She nodded, realizing that no one had ever asked her that question before, tears welling up in her hazy eyes. With her wrinkled fingertips, she touched the face of her savior and saw that she was young and attractive. Lena and Bev discovered a benefit to each other's companionship from that day forward. They had discovered a caring soul in all of mankind, even though the world remained the same uncaring place. Bev started to view the world through the eyes of the girl when Lena read her poems to her. Bev would frequently cry and give the little child a hug, overtaken by the passion in her speech. Bev would remark, "You have a bright life ahead of you. I just know it." Bev was an old woman who was never particularly forthcoming about her personal life, but Lena was more than pleased to take care of her. For Lena, it didn't matter. What mattered was that she was back in the presence of a mother figure. The one major issue Lena was still having trouble with was getting food. She knew it wouldn't be proper to use the cafe owner's sympathies for her to get more food, and she'd tried in vain to win over the goodwill of practically everyone who passed by. Of course, Lena thought to herself, I can let Bev have my lunch. She looks awfully frail, and I can always manage to find leftovers around the neighborhood. Consequently, Lena asked Bev to wait at the bus stop each afternoon while she went to get lunch. She would come back and give Bev the lunch right away. The old woman had inquired, "What about your lunch?" the first several times. "I see that I'm holding my own sandwich. Don't ask me to share, it looks way better than yours," Lena said, laughing away her hunger. The girl would go out later in the evening, while Bev was well sleeping, and scurry about for leftover food to satisfy her rumbling stomach. It had been about a year since the two women's endearing relationship began. Lena was walking back from the library one very brilliant Sunday afternoon when she saw Bev engaged in a serious conversation with a man dressed in a suit. He listened for the most part, then swiftly moved on. Bev gave the girl a gentle shoulder slap and burst out laughing, leaving Lena speechless. "Clearly a gold digger, that one," Lena remarked about the man. Regaining her composure immediately, Bev hugged Lena and said, "Don't forget that you are the daughter I never had, and you have a bright life ahead of you," all the while smiling. Bev's final hug made Lena's heart melt. She had no one left to share the sandwich with when she returned with it. On the streets that had become their home, Bev had taken her final breath. After a week without Bev's grin, Lena was overcome with loneliness once more. She noticed a familiar figure approaching her just as she was ready to cry again. It was the man dressed in a suit that she had seen the day before Bev passed away. "You! Why have you come here, and who are you?" Seeking someone to vent her rage on, Lena inquired. "Miss Beverly's attorney was me. She signed her will, which she had revised a few months prior, the day I went to see her." Lena paid close attention, though she was still perplexed as to how Bev, a low-income woman, could have afforded a lawyer with such a fancy appearance. "Miss Beverly gave everything to you, including her house and all of her fortune. Everything you require to know is included in this letter that she dictated to me." Lena, clueless, opened the letter and started to read. "Please pardon me, Lena, my lovely poetess. I misled you. I was alone and homeless, but I was never impoverished. Although I wouldn't describe them as such, I have a family. Soon after the death of my husband Jerry years ago, my boys removed their blind mother from their life. Jerry left me an enormous amount of money, but I quickly realized that my kids weren't deserving of anything." As Lena read the letter again, her heart began to race because she could hear Bev's words in her voice. "Their hearts will shatter now that I'm gone, not because they lost their mother, but because they lost a wealth. They will definitely find you soon, I'm sure of it. Lena, I'm not a mean woman. Only you bothered to adore my heart, even though I have one. Even though I couldn't see, I understood that you gave up your lunch and went without food for me. I had just been duped by you on the first day. I appreciate that you did not desert me as my kids did. I understand how lonely and hurt your heart must be, but know that I haven't given up on you either. My kid, rush for the bright future that lies ahead of you." Lena was astounded by this lyrical turn of events. Her soul friend had given her with a ticket to a new life, and she was still unsure of what to do with it. Sure enough, Bev's children eventually appeared in fancy automobiles, acting as though they were in real pain, and asked Lena for help. However, Lena knew she was doing it for herself and the lady who had transformed her life when she graciously reprimanded them and moved into the mansion that had been presented to her. What lessons may we draw from this tale? Be the sunshine for someone else. When Lena ran upon Beverly, she wasn't feeling well herself, who, albeit hiding their affluence, had nothing. Despite her meager resources, Lena offered food and company to the defenseless blind woman out of kindness. You will always be blessed in some manner by the generosity you show others. Lena made the decision to go above and above to assist Beverly, who was blind and destitute. She never thought how that act of compassion would come back to transform her life. Talk about this tale with your companions. It might motivate them and make their day better. You might appreciate this tale about two kind police officers who see a needy grab a pizza for the starving girl on the street. The cops are shocked to learn that the same girl had located them and paid them a visit years later. This essay was prepared by a professional writer and was motivated by anecdotes from our readers' daily lives. Any similarity to real names or places is entirely accidental. All pictures are just meant to serve as examples. Tell us your tale and perhaps it will make a difference in someone's life. When a woman noticed what seemed to be a garbage bag on the side of the road, her jaw fell. What's inside the bag, in your opinion? That will become clear in a minute. Melissa Sargent Lewis was one of those persons who just so happens to be in the right place at the right moment. When this woman glanced into a garbage bag she had found on the side of the road, her jaw fell. Melissa was an elementary school teacher in Kentucky, and as any mother of 2 children will attest, it may be challenging to leave the home on time each day. Melissa was running late this day because one of her boys was having trouble finding his backpack, and the other was having trouble finding his footwear. She had no idea that her boy's tardiness might save a life as she was running around the house trying to get them ready. She attempted to get to work as soon as she could after leaving her youngsters off at school. She made the decision to take an alternate route that would take her via Kentucky's rural roads. Well, she came upon a garbage bag while driving. Normally this wouldn't be so odd, but there was movement in this garbage bag. She knew there was life inside the bag and that it would probably have perished if she hadn't stopped when she drove up next to it. She forgot about being late to work and reached for her phone. She desired to record the event on camera. She was a little afraid as she walked up to the moving bag. It goes without saying that you had to be afraid since she had no idea what would be in the bag. It can be an animal in fear that is about to attack. She approached the bag cautiously and ripped it open. The sight within left her feeling sick to her stomach and brought tears to her eyes. There was a cute small dog in the bag. He was extremely loving and quite vivacious. He began to bounce and wag his tail at the sight of Melissa. He showed her how appreciative he was to be discovered by licking her face when she scooped him up. Because the dog had on a collar, Melissa could see that he had formerly belonged to someone. Sadly, there was no identification on it. She was unable to leave the small puppy by alone on the side of the road with a clear conscience. Even if he wasn't in the bag, she realized that if she left him there, she would be just as awful as the person who had originally placed him there. She then loaded the dog into her car and drove him to work. Melissa took her 2 sons home from school that day and showed them the dog. Her concerns were for the puppy's well-being. She brought him to the veterinarian to make sure he was healthy, and the veterinarian estimated that the puppy was no more than 8 weeks old. Melissa took the puppy home after the veterinarian gave him his vaccines and the examination. Her curiosity in how the dog ended there on the side of the road was unabated. She pondered whether his owners had been harsh to him and had taken him from his house and abandoned him there. She uploaded a photo of the dog to the internet later that evening. She captioned the picture with, "If this is your puppy, please let me know. You are a sicko if you are the rascal who threw it by the side of the road in a trash bag." Melissa phoned the sheriff's department and animal control after sharing her photo. Who would do such a thing to such a little, defenseless animal was the question both organizations sought to answer. Unfortunately, they had very little opportunity of identifying the offender. The decision was made by Melissa and her boys to adopt the dog and bring him into the family. Since they found him in a garbage bag, they gave him the nickname Hefty. Hefty uploaded a video of the puppy with the comment, "He's playful," after the dog had been living with her for a few weeks. "We were just discussing his resilience. He wanders around with his new toys. He is amiable. He was priceless even on the day I took him into the school where I teach." Mrs. Kelly, the guidance counselor, has a deep affection for animals. The children adored him when she brought him to visit the 2nd grade class. Melissa was lucky to stop her car when she did. Had she not discovered that small man, he might not have survived on his own. Melissa and her boys have given Hefty a wonderful home and a loving family. Hefty has done as much for Melissa's family as they have done for him, according to Melissa. He has been a great addition to their small family, she adds, and he brought love and pleasure into her home. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.